He's the richest man on Earth, a tech genius, a space pioneer, and the mind behind Tesla and SpaceX. But behind Elon Musk's billion-dollar empire lies a story no one saw coming. Not about rockets, not about fame, about an 85-year-old woman, a former nanny, forgotten by the world, still working just to survive. Then, in one chance moment, Elon discovers she's still alive. And what he does next, it's not just surprising, it's unforgettable. This isn't a story about money, it's about memory, gratitude, and the quiet hero who raised the man who now leads the future. Stay with us, because what Elon Musk did next left the entire world speechless. The billionaire who never forgot. "Stop the car!" Elon Musk's voice cut through the quiet hum of the electric vehicle. His assistant, startled, tapped the brakes and turned to look at him. "Everything okay, sir?" she asked, eyebrows raised. Elon didn't respond right away. His eyes were locked on a figure standing on the corner of the street, just outside a modest neighborhood convenience store in Los Angeles. What he saw took him decades back, not in miles, but in memories. There, under the blazing California sun, stood an elderly woman, her back slightly hunched, hands weathered with time, and her silver hair neatly tied into a bun. She was handing out flyers, smiling at strangers, trying to make eye contact, not with desperation, but with dignity. She wore a simple cardigan over a floral dress and orthopedic shoes. At first glance, she might have seemed like any other elderly woman trying to stay active, but to Elon Musk, she was not just anyone. She was Ada, the woman who had once held his hand when he scraped his knee, the one who had wiped his tears when he came home from school feeling defeated, and the one who had whispered bedtime stories in a soft South African accent when the world outside seemed too harsh. He hadn't seen her in over 30 years. He opened the car door without another word and walked toward her. His assistant tried to follow, confused, but he raised a hand to stop her. As he approached, his heart pounded in his chest, not from nerves, but disbelief. Could it really be her? "Ada," he called softly. The woman turned slowly. Her eyes, still sharp despite her age, scanned his face. A moment passed. Recognition dawned like sunrise. Her lips parted. "Elon?" she whispered, her voice trembling. He nodded, and without hesitation, they embraced. That moment, a world-famous billionaire hugging an elderly woman on a sun-soaked street corner, was the kind of moment that no PR stunt or viral tweet could ever replicate. It was real. It was raw. They pulled apart slightly, tears in both their eyes. "My stars," Ada said, brushing a tear from her cheek. "You were just a little thing the last time I saw you." "I was," Elon replied, smiling, "but I never forgot you." They walked to a nearby bench under the shade of a tree, catching up in fragments. Elon could hardly believe the coincidence. He'd been in the area visiting a quiet prototype facility for a new Tesla project, something low-key, no media, no fanfare. The car took a detour due to roadworks, bringing them through a part of town he'd never usually pass through. Fate, it seemed, had its own GPS. Ada, meanwhile, had moved to the U.S. decades ago to be closer to her sister, who had since passed. She lived alone in a small apartment nearby and worked part-time jobs just to cover rent and medical bills. "I keep busy," she said with a proud smile. "I don't like sitting still too long." She explained how she'd lost contact with Elon's family after he moved to Canada as a teen. There were no phones or email back then. She always hoped he'd done well, but she had no idea he had become Elon Musk, the visionary behind Tesla, SpaceX, and more. Elon sat quietly, feeling a strange mix of guilt and awe. How had someone so vital to his early life, someone who helped raise him when things were falling apart, ended up alone, working at 85? He thought back to those long days as a child, the tough times when his parents were fighting or when school bullies made his life miserable. Through it all, Ada had been his rock. She gave him love without expecting anything in return. She taught him kindness and resilience long before he ever built a rocket. And now, fate had brought them together. Not in a corporate office or a press conference, but on a street corner where the world had nearly forgotten her. But Elon hadn't. He looked at her hands, still strong but marked by time, and felt something shift inside him. It was more than nostalgia. It was responsibility. He had all the resources in the world, but at that moment, no invention, no billion-dollar deal, no rocket launch felt as important as what he needed to do for Ada. "Come with me," he said gently. And in that quiet moment, with no cameras, no stage lights, and no tweets, Elon Musk made a decision that would inspire millions and change Ada's life forever. Section 2. The Woman Behind the Genius. As they sat beneath the quiet shade of that old oak tree, with Los Angeles traffic humming in the distance, Elon Musk leaned in, listening not as a billionaire, not as a CEO, but as a once-lost boy reconnecting with a piece of his soul. Ada was more than a nanny. She was a constant in a world that, for young Elon, had often felt unstable. Born in South Africa, Elon's childhood had been marked by emotional distance, bullying, and the quiet isolation of being a misunderstood thinker. His parents' divorce at a young age left scars, and his school life was anything but peaceful. He was often the odd kid, buried in books, building things, dreaming of Mars while other children played soccer. And through all of it, there was Ada. She wasn't hired because she had a degree in child development or experience with elite families. She didn't need a resume. What she had was patience, warmth, and a kind of quiet wisdom that's impossible to teach. From the moment she stepped into the Musk home, she became more than a caregiver. She became Elon's emotional anchor. "I remember," Elon said softly, "you used to sit by my bed and tell me stories. You'd say, 'One day you'll build machines that fly through the stars.'" Ada chuckled. "You never stopped talking about space," she replied, "even when I was trying to get you to eat your vegetables." They both laughed, but there was a deeper truth buried beneath the humor. Ada had believed in Elon long before the world did. When teachers called him strange, Ada saw him as curious. When classmates called him weird, Ada said he was gifted. And when he cried in silence after school, she sat beside him, never forcing words, just being there. An invisible shield from a harsh world. He looked at her now, aged but graceful, and the memories flooded in. The warm soup she made when he was sick, the songs she hummed while doing laundry, the way she'd sneak him a cookie after dinner even when he hadn't finished his homework. But now, that woman, the woman who once gave him strength when he had none, was working to survive at 85 years old. She had no children of her own. Her husband, a gentle mechanic she had once described as a man of few words and kind hands, had passed in the late 1990s. After retiring from caregiving, Ada had moved to the United States to live with her sister. But when her sister died, Ada found herself alone, her modest pension barely covering her expenses, her pride keeping her from asking for help. "I never wanted to be a burden," she said, sipping her tea, "so I do what I can. A few hours here and there, passing out flyers. It keeps the rent paid and the lights on." Elon's heart ached. The woman who had once helped shape his spirit, a woman who never once asked for anything, had been quietly weathering storms alone while he launched rockets into the sky. He leaned forward, eyes filled with sincerity. "Ada, you should never have had to work another day in your life. Not after everything you gave me." She smiled gently, her eyes gleaming. "Oh, but I'm proud of you, Elon. I don't need anything." But that was the thing. She never needed anything. She simply gave. And now Elon knew in his core that he couldn't walk away from this moment like it was a sweet reunion and nothing more. This wasn't going to be a nostalgic afternoon visit with tea and old stories. It was going to be a turning point. For so long, Ada had given without expectation, without conditions, without recognition. She didn't do it for applause. She didn't do it for money. She did it out of love, the kind of love that few ever experience, and even fewer ever return. And that's when Elon made up his mind. He wasn't just going to help Ada. He was going to honor her. He would use every resource, every connection, and every ounce of influence he had, not just to change her life, but to make sure the world knew who she was and what she meant to him. This wasn't about a billionaire doing charity. This was about a man remembering the person who loved him when no one else truly understood him. And what Elon did next would start a movement far beyond anything Ada could have imagined. Section 3. A quiet struggle, a loud response. The sun was beginning to set as Elon Musk stepped back into his vehicle, but something inside him had changed forever. He wasn't thinking about his next board meeting. He wasn't thinking about the upcoming SpaceX launch or the latest Tesla stock surge. His mind was consumed by Ada, her quiet resilience, her weathered hands, her soft, tired smile. As the car pulled away, Elon stared out the window in silence. How could the world have overlooked someone like her? He had spent decades creating futuristic technologies, leading teams of geniuses, reshaping how humanity thinks about transportation and space. But none of that would have been possible if one woman hadn't cared enough to nurture the dreamer inside a lonely child. Ada had never asked for help, but now he was going to give her the world. The very next morning, Elon called a private meeting with his most trusted inner circle. No press, no cameras, no advisors, just a clear message. I need to do something for someone important, quietly, immediately. Within 24 hours, a fully furnished luxury apartment in a senior living community was secured for Ada, complete with 24/7 care, medical support, and access to any service she could ever need. But that was just the beginning. Elon also set up a trust fund in her name, enough not only for her to live comfortably for the rest of her life, but to allow her to support other senior caregivers and retired nannies who had fallen through society's cracks. But he didn't stop there. Elon knew Ada wasn't the only one. There were thousands like her, people who had quietly shaped generations, changed lives behind the scenes, and were now growing old without support, recognition, or dignity. So he asked his foundation team to develop a program called Guardians of Genius. The initiative would locate and support unsung caregivers, nannies, housekeepers, mentors, teachers, the overlooked pillars who helped shape today's leaders, innovators, and thinkers. Monthly stipends, housing support, healthcare access, and above all, honor. When news of the program leaked to the public a few weeks later, it didn't explode with controversy or memes like so many of Elon's previous announcements. Instead, it caught people off guard in the best way possible. The headlines didn't scream Musk buys Twitter or Musk names son after equation. This time it read, Elon Musk gives back to the woman who raised him, quietly and completely. Soon social media lit up, not with jokes, but with stories. People began sharing photos of their childhood nannies, retired school teachers, and housekeepers who'd become like family. Hashtags like Shaq's Guardians of Genius and Thank You Ada began trending. But the most moving moment came when Ada, now settled into her new home, was invited to speak, reluctantly, humbly, at a small private event hosted by the Musk Foundation. She stood at the podium, her hand still a little shaky, but her voice full of clarity. I didn't raise Elon to become rich, she said. I just wanted him to feel loved, to know he mattered. That's all any child needs to grow strong. The room was silent. A few executives wiped away tears. Elon stood in the back, his eyes misty. This wasn't just a reunion anymore. It had become something bigger, a moment that reminded the world that behind every genius is someone who believed in them first. Ada's story wasn't a fairy tale comeback. It was a real-life reminder of how invisible acts of love can echo for decades, sometimes returning in ways no one could have predicted. And Elon's response wasn't about wealth. It was about recognition, about using power to lift the very people who once carried you when you couldn't stand on your own. He didn't tweet about it. He didn't make a video. He simply let Ada's story speak for itself. And speak it did. To millions. From a quiet corner in Los Angeles to the heart of Silicon Valley and beyond, Ada's legacy was no longer forgotten. It started with one woman, but the ripple didn't stop there. Just weeks after Ada moved into her new home, a sunlit apartment in a serene retirement village nestled just outside San Francisco, something unexpected happened. She became a symbol. What Elon Musk did for her wasn't just a gesture of kindness. It was a powerful message, quietly broadcast across the globe. Don't forget the people who helped you rise. And people listened. News stations that once focused solely on Elon's tech empire and unpredictable tweets were now covering something different, a deeply human story. The photo of Ada smiling in her new apartment, a book in her lap, and fresh flowers by the window began making rounds on social media. Her story became a thread that connected strangers, CEOs, nurses, teachers, drivers, all sharing their own Ada. My high school janitor gave me money for lunch every day when I had nothing. My neighbor used to babysit me for free so my single mom could work nights. A woman named Maria taught me English after school in her kitchen. The hashtag #thank you Ada exploded. Thousands of stories poured in, flooding TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook. Young people posted videos visiting their childhood caretakers, teachers, and mentors, bringing them groceries, gifts, even setting up GoFundMe pages in their honor. Seniors across the world, some forgotten, some barely scraping by, were being rediscovered and celebrated. And quietly watching it all from her living room, sipping her tea, was Ada. She never asked for fame. She didn't even own a smartphone. But when a young journalist from a national paper visited her for an interview, she said something that struck a chord across generations. People think love is something loud, something big, but sometimes it's just staying up with a sick child. Sometimes it's washing their school uniform so they feel proud. Sometimes it's listening when no one else does. That's what I gave Elon, and I'd do it again. Those words went viral, and the attention didn't stop with social media. Soon, nonprofits, tech firms, and community groups began launching similar initiatives. Inspired by Elon's Guardians of Genius project, companies started offering legacy awards, one-time grants to the quiet heroes behind successful individuals. At a startup convention in Austin, a young entrepreneur broke down in tears on stage as he introduced the woman who raised him while his mother battled cancer, now gifted a house thanks to his new app's first earnings. In a small town in India, a retired headmistress received a scholarship fund set up in her name by her former students, many of whom had become doctors and engineers around the world. And all of it traced back to Ada. But Elon wasn't finished. He wanted to preserve her story forever, not as a headline, but as a legacy. So he commissioned a documentary not about himself, but about Ada, and the many like her who helped raise the world's thinkers, dreamers, and doers. It would be called Hands That Built the Future. With Ada's blessing, a small crew followed her gentle daily routine, reading by the window, feeding birds in the courtyard, video calling with Elon's children, who now called her Grandma Ada. The final scene of the film was simple yet powerful. Ada sitting on a bench at sunset, watching a group of children play in the park nearby. Her voice soft and sure, playing over the visuals. You don't need money to leave a legacy. You just need love and time. When the documentary aired on Netflix and YouTube Originals, it received millions of views in its first week. Critics called it a reminder of the humanity behind greatness and a tribute to the invisible pillars of society. But perhaps the most moving moment came during the film's premiere. Ada sat beside Elon, her hand in his. No red carpet, no paparazzi, just a quiet evening celebrating a quiet life that changed the world in the most unexpected way. And for once, the spotlight wasn't on the rockets, the cars, or the billions. It was on something much more powerful: gratitude. Section 5. A New Mission, the Ada Foundation. In a world obsessed with wealth, numbers, and achievements, people often forget that some of life's most meaningful legacies aren't built in boardrooms or on stock tickers. They're built in kitchens, at bedtime, during quiet conversations, and through unshakable love. And that is what Ada gave Elon Musk. As the world celebrated her story, Elon began to reflect on something deeper. Yes, he had made headlines for electric cars, reusable rockets, and futuristic technologies. But all of that, every invention, every risk, every sleepless night of innovation, had roots in a foundation built by someone who never once asked for recognition. The legacy Ada left wasn't in bank accounts or buildings. It was in character. It was in kindness. It was in the simple, patient belief in someone before they proved themselves to the world. That realization began changing Elon's perspective, not just about Ada, but about success itself. One day, during a private interview, a reporter asked him, "You've launched rockets, disrupted industries, and become the richest man on Earth. But what's the greatest return you've ever received?" Elon didn't hesitate. Love from someone who didn't expect anything in return. And that became his mission, moving forward. Elon expanded the Guardians of Genius program, partnering with schools, foster care agencies, and elder support groups to identify caregivers around the world, those who had poured themselves into others, often with no family, no retirement plan, and no safety net. But he didn't want it to be just another billionaire's charity. He wanted people everywhere to be part of it. So he introduced a new feature on X, formerly Twitter, Nominate Your Guardian. It allowed users to share a photo and story of the unsung hero in their life. Every month, 10 of these guardians would receive life-changing grants, care packages, or reunions with loved ones. The stories poured in: teachers who bought kids lunch for years, retired coaches who mentored kids for free, elderly women who helped raise generations of neighbors. The world for a moment slowed down and looked back. It wasn't just about Ada anymore. It was about the millions like her and the people they helped become great. Meanwhile, Ada's life became a gentle rhythm of peace and joy. She spent time tending to a small garden on her balcony, often waving at kids from nearby schools who now knew her story. Letters from around the world arrived daily, some from fans, some from strangers, all filled with gratitude. One letter, handwritten by a young girl in Brazil, read, "I want to be like you when I grow up. Kind, brave, invisible, but unforgettable." As the seasons passed, Ada began to slow down, but her spirit never dimmed. On her 86th birthday, Elon surprised her with a quiet gathering. No media, no entourage. Just Ada, a handful of close friends, and Elon's children who sang "Happy Birthday" with homemade cards and cake. In that moment, surrounded by laughter and love, she turned to Elon and whispered, "You've gone so far, Elon, but you never left behind the boy I knew." Elon smiled, tears forming in his eyes. "Because of you, I never had to." When Ada passed peacefully in her sleep a few months later, the world mourned, not just a nanny, but a symbol. Her funeral, per her wishes, was modest, quiet, and filled with sunflowers, her favorite. But her legacy didn't end there. Elon announced the Ada Foundation, a global initiative to support caregivers, educators, and everyday heroes who often go unnoticed. The first project, building a school in South Africa, the country where Ada first cared for young Elon, designed not just to teach science and math, but to nurture empathy, creativity, and human connection. The name of the school? Ada's Garden. Today, a statue of Ada sits quietly at the school entrance, not with a crown or a title, but with a book in her lap and a child beside her, looking up with wonder. And the plaque reads, "She didn't raise the richest man in the world. She raised a boy who would never forget the power of love."